This is the brand new Rlaarlo XTS-P12, and this thing looks absolutely awesome. Let's dig in. First of all, Rlaarlo did a really good job with this body. It kind of looks like a Volkswagen from the front and back, but isn't designed after any specific vehicle. I think this paint job looks really nice, and it doesn't come with a bunch of stickers on it out of the box, which I do appreciate. They do give you a sheet of stickers so you can decorate it however you want. I'll probably leave most of these off, though. This does appear to have functional lights in the front and in the rear, which we'll be checking out in a little bit. There's a nice hard plastic wing on the back here, as well as a scoop on the roof, which is going to act as a roof skid. And there's a few other hard plastic bits and pieces as well. To remove the body, we have these two turn latches. You do need to pull them up and turn them. That should keep them nice and secure, but then the body comes right off. You can see those latches are attached to hard plastic side plates, which should hold them in pretty well. And then we also have pins in the front and in the rear, which mate into the chassis here and here. All the lighting wiring goes to a central lighting controller like we've seen on a bunch of different Rlaarlos. This one's actually screwed in, which is really nice to see. Those screws are also what are holding on this roof skid. I appreciate this because I've seen other ones that have come double-sided taped and that has come off. This definitely won't be coming off on its own. The Lexan itself feels pretty decent. Not the thickest thing I've ever felt, but not the thinnest either. Underneath that body, we've got a really densely packed chassis. There's a lot to check out here. First thing I want to take a look at is this battery. This is a Rlaarlo branded 3-cell 2200 milliamp hour LiPo. They're claiming 35C, which seems reasonable, but let's make sure. And to check that, we're going to hook it up to our LiPo dyno. This is a very high quality ESR meter. ESR stands for equivalent series resistance, and it basically tells us how well energy is going to flow out of this battery. And with this battery, it looks like we're getting 24C, which isn't exactly 35C, but these will get a little bit more powerful after the first few runs. So I think that 35C claim is reasonable. To go along with that battery, you get one of these little 3S USB chargers. I'm not a big fan of these. They don't always charge properly, but I have been curious to see what's inside one of them. So let's crack this open real quick. These types of shells are usually ultrasonically welded or glued together, but they can usually be cracked open with a little bit of unreasonable force. This one's pretty tough. There we go. Now, the reason I want to crack this open is because I want to take a look at the chip that's on here. I've had a few people tell me that these don't actually balance charge or don't balance charge properly. Unfortunately, I can't find any references to the numbers on this IC, so we're not going to be able to go any further with that. But we can see that all of the balance wires are hooked up to the board, and they are hooked up through circuitry that goes into that chip. So I suspect, at least ostensibly, it does charge correctly. Though I've found the calibration on these to not be the best in the world. So especially since you can't see what's going on with them, I personally don't like to trust these long term. I'd recommend getting a decent charger with a screen on it so you can see what's going on with your battery. That battery is going to be powering this 3S ESC. And if we take a closer look at this ESC, we can see it has a Rubicon capacitor on it. Having a good name brand capacitor like that doesn't guarantee the ESC is high quality, but it means the manufacturers took the time and money to get a decent cap, so it's probably a good sign at the very least. That ESC is going to be powering a brushless motor, which we can see right here, and it's going to be powered by a new receiver with some features we haven't seen from Rlaarlo before, and those are going to be putting power down to these wheels and tires, which I think look pretty good. As you can see here, the nut is not serrated, but this is a nylock nut. If you're not familiar with a nylock nut, it's just got a little bit of plastic embedded in the end here, and that plastic deforms when it gets threaded on, which gives it a little bit of resistance from coming off, so hopefully these won't be falling off even though they're not serrated. Underneath that, you can see we've got a 12mm hex that's stuck in the wheel. I'm not a huge fan of those hexes coming off with the wheels because you also have the pin fall out, and these fairly small pins can be really easily lost. By the way, if you ever do lose or break one of these little pins, you can go to your local hardware store and buy a drill bit that's the right size, cut it down and use it. Drill stock works really well as a replacement for these, and sometimes it can be a lot quicker than waiting for parts. These tires seem pretty generic. They are medium soft compound. They definitely are foam filled. You can see the wheels are vented in here and the tires aren't, and I think these wheels look just fine. I prefer this more subtle black look to the chrome that they have on the new TK07. At the very least, this won't be polarizing. I think most people will find it agreeable. Overall, these tires look just fine. If you've been enjoying the crazy projects we've been doing lately, make sure you hit that subscribe button because I've got some really interesting things coming up, including a follow-up to that hybrid video that's going to take it to the next level, and I'm really not sure how it's going to work out. So the hex stuck in the wheels on every one of these, I really would prefer they stay attached to the car. It's not a big deal, but something I'd like to see them improve on in the future. As you can see behind those hexes, we do have little shim washers. These are really nice to see as they tighten everything up, but again, are one more thing that could fall off and get lost if you're not careful. And then behind those, as you can see, we have shielded bearings. I'd love to see sealed bearings here, but shielded bearings should be fine. And for the price of this car, really aren't unexpected. Before we dig into the rest of the mechanics on this, as you can see, we do have a nice little rear splitter here to go along with the body. If you notice, there are wires going into the tailpipe. So just like on the 1/10 scale version, we're going to have a little exhaust LED in here. That's a really neat touch. We've got a good strong looking front support with a foam bumper that feels really high quality. And we've got a matching front skid on the bottom. And then we've also got these side pod Nerf bars where the body clips go into. These shocks are held in with standard screws and spacers on the top. These typically aren't quite as strong as a dedicated standoff, but if you bend one, they're a lot easier to replace. So it's a give and take. Now, unfortunately, in order to access this lower screw on the shock, we do have to take this rear bumper off. Obviously, there's always going to be compromises in these sorts of designs, but I would prefer a design that accommodates getting these screws out without having to take other stuff off. We've got machine screws throughout this car, but a common theme is that a lot of them are going to be 1.5mm head. So if you get one of these, get a good set of MIP bits because these 1.5mm head screws get stripped out really, really easily. I would say a car this size is right on the edge of what I would consider to be acceptable to have 1.5mm screws. Personally, I think if Arrma can avoid them with the Grom, then everybody else can avoid them as well, and I'd prefer not to see them anymore, even in something of this size. Taking those 3 screws out should let us take this off, and it does. And now taking a closer look at these shocks, they are a hybrid plastic aluminum setup. We've got threaded body shocks with aluminum adjustment collars, all plastic lowers, and my favorite combination, aluminum plastic cap. I really like this design because the aluminum threads are nice and strong, so they're not going to strip out, but you've got flex in this upper eye so it won't bend or break too easily. As you can see here, we've just got a standard bladder, and this does seem to be nice and full of oil. Rlaarlo does seem to be good at getting their shocks completely full, and whereas them being a little bit low on fluid doesn't make a huge difference, it will make a difference in how these cars handle. The shock fluid here feels medium thick, the shock feels smooth, and I expect this to be a good functional shock. I haven't really had very many problems with Rlaarlo shocks no matter what vehicle they're on, so I expect these to be fine as well. The front and rear differentials on this car are top loading, which means we've got quite a bit to remove to get to them. One of those things is going to be this sway bar. This does have sway bars front and rear, which is nice to see on a small car like this. I have to say I'm really excited to get this thing out and bash it. Rlaarlo's 1/10 scale rally car was one of the most impressive cars I've ever used, and I'm really hoping this is going to be the same way. The little grub screw holding the sway bar in has a tiny bit of thread locker on it, but you'll probably want to go in and put a little bit more on there if you want to be super secure that this isn't going to come out. When getting these sway bars out of the way, you can usually just take one side off and the mount here in the middle and just swing it up out of the way. Obviously, taking the whole thing out will get it further out of the way, but this saves just a tiny bit of time and you won't lose it. You can often get away without having to take the entire shock tower off as well. Usually just removing it from the bulkhead gets you enough room to get it up out of the way. Speaking of which, this shock tower is 6061 aluminum and it does appear to be machined, not stamped, so this looks really high quality. Now, unfortunately, even after taking those screws out, this cover is still trapped by the spur cover, so we're going to have to take that off as well, which isn't a big deal in this case because we were going to do it anyway. By the way, this center brace does hinge up out of the way, though you do need to be careful of the wiring that's attached to it. In order to get it all the way out of the way, let's go ahead and disconnect the motor from the ESC. While I have this disconnected, I want to show you one thing that's important to know. These motor bullet connectors are only 3.5mm in diameter, and most smaller ESCs like this Castle Cobra 10 actually use 4mm bullets. As you can see, these fit in here really loosely and aren't going to work together. So if you do decide you want to upgrade this ESC, you're probably going to have to either adapt these bullets or solder on some new ones. Of course, you'd only really need to do that if 3S isn't enough for this, which I suspect it's going to be, but we're going to find that out in just a few minutes. This spur gear cover does come off in 2 different sections, so you can get in here and inspect and adjust your mesh without taking the whole thing apart. That's really nice to see. Another really nice touch is that the vast majority of the screws are the same size. That makes keeping track of where they go a lot easier. All right, now if we pull the spur cover off, we have 2 more screws we need to take out, then we should be able to take a look at that rear diff. And yep, she's free now. Pulling this differential out, we can see we've got a fairly basic differential here. These are not machined steel gears. Let's make sure they actually are steel. And yes, a magnet sticks to it, so these are steel. These are going to be sintered steel, which is fine for a car this size. Inside the differential, we're going to see we have some fluid, which means this is a sealed differential, which is great to see. Not a lot of fluid in here, though. We are going to run it exactly how it came, because that's how yours is probably going to come. We've got all steel gears in here, which means this is going to be an all-steel drivetrain, which again is great to see for a car this size and price point. One thing I want to mention about filling differentials, technically a properly filled differential is going to end up being basically full when you actually put it together, but the amount of fluid you need to actually lubricate the gears inside is quite a bit less than that. And unless unless you pull a differential apart and it's truly dry inside, there probably is enough fluid to lubricate those gears and keep them safe, even if it isn't as much as you'd like to see. These differentials are going to be running on shielded bearings. We do have steel outputs that do look pretty high quality. Some of the early Omni Terminators had problems with premature wear, though I don't think we've seen that on these cars. One problem we have seen on this platform are these dog bones breaking. These dog bones do appear to be similar to what we've seen on other vehicles on this platform, but we're going to be running much smaller tires, and that makes a huge difference in how much stress there is on the drivetrain. I suspect we won't see any problem with these dog bones on this car, but we'll just have to wait and find out. Those bones are going to be running in standard stub axles in the rear. And then this part of the drivetrain will be very similar in the front, though we're going to have CVDs in the front instead of dog bones because these steering angles put more stress on everything, and dog bones tend to bind if they're used in the front. That's why we almost always see CVDs in the front and often not in the back because they're really not necessary in the back. Driving that differential is going to be a sintered steel bevel pinion gear, and then running that we do have a machined spur gear which is on a slipper clutch, and that's going to be driven by a machined pinion gear on this brushless motor, which does use a sliding aluminum motor mount. That motor mount's going to give us room for this optional speed pinion gear. We'll see how this runs with the stock pinion gear. If it's not fast enough, we can always put the speed gear in, but the trade-off on this speed gear is going to be less low-end torque and potentially a lot more heat in your motor and in your ESC. In this same bag, Rlaarlo is also giving us extra mounting tape for the ESC and for the power button, which is a good thing because this power button already fell off. Personally, I'd like to see them include just one set of better mounting tape that doesn't fall off, but it is nice to have spares. This slipper clutch is going to be externally adjustable, though it'll be a little bit tricky. You're going to need something like a small pair of pliers that allows you to grab the nut from the outside. Once you've got that, you can roll the car forward and backward holding the nut still, and that will thread the nut on and off this slipper. That squeezes this spring more or less, which puts more or less tension on these pads, which allows it to slip more or less. And in front of that slipper clutch, rounding out the all-steel drivetrain, we do have a steel center drive shaft with steel output cups as well. All right, let me get all this mechanical stuff put back together because we need to take a closer look at the electronics. There's some cool new stuff in here. Inside this receiver box, we have a new receiver which has a built-in gyro. We've seen a built-in gyro before on Rlaarlo cars, but what we haven't seen before is this included transmitter. This thing's pretty sweet. First of all, opening the battery compartment, you can see this does not take a normal AAA or AA setup. It actually takes an included 18650 rechargeable. This is a great step up from standard AA's, and it'll actually charge right here from the USB-C. Turning this on, you can see it has two-way communication, so it'll tell us battery charge percentage. We've got a dedicated light button here. And the best part about it is turning the gyro on and off doesn't require a secret handshake like it used to. You can just push a button to turn it on and off. This also has a really nice cushy feeling steering wheel, and overall for a small remote on a cheap car, this is really a step up. And rounding out the features, we have an 11 kilogram centimeter metal gear servo. This is a mini style servo, which there aren't a lot of out there. I'd prefer to see a size that has more upgrade options, but there are a few available. That's going to be connected to an adjustable servo saver. We also have adjustable tie rods, adjustable upper links in the front and in the rear. And then on the underside, we have a nice aluminum flat pan chassis. The A, B, C, and D blocks are all plastic, which should be fine for a car like this. And we've got these nice short plastic arms in the front and rear, as well as kingpin steering with bushings in it, so that should be nice and smooth and not bind up. And then of course we've got another machined aluminum 6061 tower here in the front. All right guys, enough tear down and talk. I want to see what this thing can do. Let's get it together and go check it out. First thing we're going to do is take a look at these lights. They're pretty basic in the front and back. It does have the dreaded turn signals though. They actually have it programmed that the turn signals don't come on right away, which is really nice. So if you're just turning back and forth a little bit, they're not going to activate for you. That's a nice touch though. I'd prefer not to have the turn signals at all, or at least have an option to turn them off. And now for a top speed run. This thing is pretty quick for having the stock gearing on it, and it actually feels reasonably stable. That gyro is doing a good amount of work. It has quite a bit of braking understeer though, which is interesting. I'm turning all the way when I'm braking and it's still going straight. See, that was full lock and it still wants to go straight. So that's just a quirk of the way this thing's designed. Overall, it feels like it handles pretty well. Let's get one more full speed pull here. Make sure we get the top speed. Full throttle. All right, let's see what we got. 32 miles an hour, that is pretty good for stock gearing on this 3S system. Let's see how it bashes. This is a medium rough asphalt surface, similar to what most of you guys are gonna be experiencing, and that's what I really like to bash on. I like to see what it's gonna feel like for most of you guys. Of course, we can find ideal conditions, but most of us are not gonna be bashing in ideal conditions, and for what this is on this fairly rough surface, it feels pretty darn good. It's got good traction with these tires, and it slides well. The gyro's putting in good work. With the gyro off, it actually feels pretty similar. It's a little bit more tail happy, but how you have it with the gyro on or off is just gonna be a personal choice. And overall, I think it feels pretty good. It's a little bouncier than I would expect, but it's also a pretty small car, so maybe I'm expecting too much from it. Now this is some fairly sandy asphalt, which is a much smoother surface, and it really does like to drift around on this surface, which feels, again, very fun. I'm having a good time with it. For how small it is, it handles pretty well. The gyro definitely helps. I would probably keep the gyro on if I were driving it. And I will say, this thing has plenty of power with the stock gearing. I really don't think it's necessary to put the optional gearing in. Of course, it's there if you want it, but I probably wouldn't use it. Now here on some soft, gravelly sand, again, it handles quite well. This thing definitely feels bigger than it is, and it feels like the suspension is tuned just about perfectly for it. We can kick up some nice rooster tails at full throttle. Yeah, this thing handles incredibly well. I'm very, very happy with it. Let's see what it does on some rougher stuff. I would say gravel like this is really starting to get on the edge of what this can handle. And as you can see, it is having a fairly hard time with it. But if you're careful with the throttle and you have some self-control, you can have fun, even on a fairly rough surface like this. This is still handling it pretty darn well. And she's kicking up some rocks, and it feels pretty fun still. Overall, yeah, it can handle this kind of surface too, though it is right on the edge. Now before we take it into the really deep stuff, let's try this Rlaarlo jump and see if it can handle just a little bit of air time. Oh yeah, it actually handled that really, really nicely. It jumped very smooth, it was quite stable in the air, didn't want to nosedive. And actually, this is a good jumper. Obviously, you're not gonna wanna do 5 foot, 6 foot, 7 foot jumps with a little car like this, but if you get one of these little Rlaarlo ramps, you can take it out, do some jumping, and have some fun with it. Let's get one more jump, maybe a little bit more speed up on this one. Yeah guys, this thing jumps really, really well. I've got a couple packs through this now on surfaces it's supposed to be run on, and so far I'm really impressed with it. I've got a few thoughts about how it handles, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But first, we need to go run this on some surfaces it's not supposed to be run on. I've had people ask me why I do this, why I run cars places they're not supposed to be run, and it's so we can find the limits of what these things are capable of. Not everybody's gonna have ideal surfaces to run these on, and I wanna show you what it can and can't do. First thing we're gonna try is some really deep, rutted up sand. This really is too much for this car, and you can see it already got stuck. However, as long as you keep your speed up and don't go too crazy with it, you can actually drive around on this kind of terrain, and it is handling it reasonably well. Obviously, it's gonna get stuck a lot more often in this kind of stuff because it's just not designed for it, but for how small this car is, how low to the ground it is, and how small the tires are, it is handling it. Now this is really ridiculous. This is tall, wet grass, and surprisingly, it's doing an okay job in it. I suspect once we get into the really tall grass, it's gonna die. But if you've got some mixed grass and dirt, even if that grass is pretty tall, it's not gonna be thrilled about it, but it does work, which again is incredibly impressive for what this thing is and how big it is. Now this is some really tall grass and weeds, and again, it is still driving. It's not driving well, it's not thrilled about it, but it's not getting stuck, it's still moving forward, and it's still going. This grass is as tall as this little car is, and I can barely see it over the grass half the time, but it is not stopping. I am incredibly impressed with this. Of course, you wouldn't want to run it like this. I have to say, guys, I think Rlaarlo has a home run here. This is an awesome little rally car. It goes places it should go. It goes places it shouldn't go. It's got a ton of really awesome features. The gyro helps a lot. The only handling issue I had with it is that it pushes really hard when you're on the brakes. So if you turn the wheels, hit the brakes, you're still going to go straight. That's really easy to work around though. And it's probably just because there's either not enough weight or not enough traction on these front tires. This new transmitter seems just fine. I love the rechargeable battery in it. I love being able to turn the gyro on and off easily. And overall, it doesn't seem to have too much lag, though I'm not super sensitive to that. So I might not be the best person to ask, but I think it feels just fine. So yeah, guys, for less than 200 bucks with a 3S battery and a charger, a brushless system, this is a really good deal. It's on a fairly well-proven platform whose weak points really aren't going to be weak points on a car like this. It looks cool, it's fun to drive, and yeah, I think you should check it out. I also think you should check one of these out.